Okay, well, we have people joining in. We're gonna wait for probably 2-3 minutes just to let people get into the conference room, and then we'll give a bit of an introduction to the new people who are joining us for the first time, and and then let's just wait for a few minutes, and then we'll
get while we wait. I will take an opportunity to connect and greet our attendees. Many people who are attending our webinars, all the time. And thank you very much for your loyalty and your interest. And there are quite a lot of new people I've noticed in the attendee list. So I wanted to take an opportunity to quickly give an introduction about ourselves. And many of you have attended already, heard it. So I apologize for that. I have to say that I'm thrilled to start reconnecting again with our professional network after summer break. I hope you all had a wonderful summer and special time with families and friends. Now, while we're waiting, very quickly, let me just tell you who we are. So basically, QPQ International is an international platform and deal advisory focused on supporting growth of green energy project developers. Our commitment and how we add value is by securing world-class partners and funders on optimal terms for developers in our network. The webinar is hosted today as a part of the series and as part of our commitment to share knowledge and support, and as well as a part of our funding accelerator program. This is an ongoing program where we interact with and support green energy project developers and helping them to package their projects, understand what's missing, understand challenges that needs to be solved before they will be, the developers will be able to secure funding, and basically ultimately put them on fast track to funding. And this is our kind of core purpose. And we pride ourselves in delivering results. We have a lot of success stories that we're celebrating this year. Many of you know that COVID was quite slow, and there were a lot of kind of turbulence because of the my phone is taking. I hope my phone is not disturbing anyone on background.
I think, and you also have Slack, notifications coming from all places. I suggest you better mute your phone and for this.
Okay, so can you just take me off stage for a second, and I'll come back, because I just realized that everything is just like.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. You just put the phone on mute, and you can. Okay. Sure. Let me.
Yes, I need to.
You can stay on stage. Just you can switch your video.
No, because but I don't. Okay, just a second.
Sure. In the meantime, we're already getting a lot of people already joining. So let me quickly tell you a little bit about technical kind of part of this webinar. In regards to Q&A and messages and questions that you might have, and also handouts. So we have a Q&A. Most of you probably see this panel at the bottom of your, I don't know, it depends where you're joining from the laptop or from your mobile device. I see in front of me like a Q&A button, and in the bottom panel, navigation panel. So that's where you can post your questions. And as Mukesh, who is our main presenter, Oksana will introduce him shortly. As he finishes his presentation, we will address all of the questions, or as many questions as we can, as the time permits. So please post those questions in the Q&A section. There is also chat. If you have some other questions or technical questions, perhaps you can also send them to us through chat. I will also be uploading two presentations in the section which is called, I think, handouts somewhere. But you guys should be able to see it in the chat as well. Once uploaded, I will also remind, by the end of the presentation, I'll remind you where you can access them. Okay, Oksana, please go ahead.
Vlad, I don't know how to switch off Slack notifications. I need you to help me,
No,
but it's okay.
I informed the team not to message you, so you don't receive anything.
Get too distracted. Okay, go. Thank you. You know that I'm not that IT savvy. Okay, so now going back to where I left. Yeah, so we actually pride ourselves in securing good, fast results. I mean, we all know that the market has been really turbulent and complicated for the last 2-3 years. Despite that, I mean, we celebrate at least, I think, 6 or 7 projects closed just in few recent months. Some of them is 600 megawatt in Canada, 550 megawatt solar in UK, 250 battery storage pipeline also in UK is 70 or 80 megawatt solar in Greece. Some projects were closed in biomass, right? So really as a statistic, at any point, probably 80% or 85% of our projects are all like in due diligence or serious discussions with investors. And with them, at least 17, 18 to 20% of projects that are in closing. So we're quite proud of these results. And of course, that's a result of our strong commitment and of course, very strong deal advisory team. And of course, and with that, I would like to kind of introduce one of our star key advisor, Mukesh Kohle, who actually was nominated as Time Business Award winner in 2023, who was called actually the global icon in the field of renewable energy, and he is actively involved in delivering complex advisory to a range of renewable energy and green energy solutions and technologies that we work with. But he's, and of course, lifetime of excellence in renewable energy, automotive, and also basically like a leading and building kind of like a world-class teams, global teams. So, but then of course, renewable energy being a kind of a anchor and the passion for Mukesh. And now Mukesh is in Australia. He's leading our kind of like a Southern Hemisphere initiatives and projects. He's our key person there with a fantastic knowledge of the Australian market. Hence, he will be talking about Australia today and how Australia is becoming green energy superpower and what you should know in order to kind of jump on the bandwagon, to take to seize the opportunity, but also be aware of pitfalls. As always, our webinars are very much focused on kind of practical application, right, rather than just theories. Mukesh, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. You look fantastic. Love this.
Great to see you, Mukesh.
Thank you. Likewise, Oksana. Thanks for that kind coordination, and thanks, Vlad, for setting up this webinar. I'm truly delighted to host and speak to the number of participants who have taken valuable time out of their busy schedules, especially in Australia. It's end of the day. In India, people are celebrating Ganesh Chaturthi, a very auspicious festival, and then early time as well as probably the people in the United States who have logged in it. I mean, I'm extremely delighted to be sort of standing here in front of you, and I'll be trying to give you the perspective of how Australia is preparing itself to become a green energy superpower. In my presentation, I'll shortly share my screen. If you can allow me to share the screen.
Sure, just give me a second. Okay, it's done. So what we're going to do also, Mukesh, we will just remove ourselves for the time being, and so we don't kind of fill up the screen, so everyone can have a full screen. And then but we'll be able to hear you. If you have any questions, just let me know, and I'll jump back on stage again. And then as you kind of approach closer to the end of of the presentation, as you probably heard, we'll have a Q&A session. So just reminding all the attendees, please post your questions in the Q&A or through the chat. We'll try to address as many of those questions as possible. I will also, while Mukesh presenting, I will also share this presentation and one more document in the chat so you guys can download it. Please, Mukesh, go ahead and yeah,
Yep.
looking forward to hear your presentation.
Thank you so much, Vlad. Yeah. So I mean, my presentation covers basically, I mean, the overview of Australia market, where we stand today, what is the government support, what are the opportunities that, I mean, the aspiration of the Australians to become a green energy superpower, you know, it brings to in the renewable energy space for the developers as well as investors. Um, Australia, I mean, a lot of times when you talk to people, like, you know, say, oh, Australia is like, you know, fag end of the world. Yes, I mean, Australia is by landmass disconnected with the most part of the world. But yes, Australia has been economically very strong. The very little population, we are just about 26 million people. But like, you know, we had like just prior to COVID, 25 years of, you know, successive growth on each of the quarter, and currently we are 13th largest in terms of GDP. Australia is, I mean, the biggest advantage for Australia is a political stability, is that by and large two-party systems, and as a result of that, S&P also rates Australia very high, AAA plus, with a stable outlook. We are known largely for the mining exports. You know, we are one of the top mining exporting country. But as like, you know, the entire world is working on energy transition, Australia has tremendous opportunity. Largely driven by, as you see on the screen, is a wind map of Australia. And on the right hand side, if you look at the scale, there are lots of like, you know, at the bottom of the scale, you have boxes filled in with red, and that's what, like, you know, the red, like, you know, is covering most of the coastal regions of Australia, and that's where we have excellent wind conditions. This rating is about 100 meters hub height in terms of, you know, wind technology, and going up to 10 and in excess of 10, which is providing a strategic advantage in terms of harnessing wind power. Not leaving behind, you know, Australia is the sunniest continent. As you see on the screen, we have, you can see the solar map of Australia. And again, at the bottom of the slide, like, you see the scale of radiations, and most of the habited areas are in excess of 2,000 odd kilowatt hours per megawatt per meter square radiation intensity. And on the northwest side is, like, you know, the Northern Territory and north part of Western Australia, which is absolutely gunning for, like, you know, significant irradiations, creating additional strategic advantage for Australia in terms of reduced cost of generation for solar energy. Now, I mean, to gain a strategic advantage from the best of the wind and solar resources, the government, after, I mean, a lot of political and bipartisan negotiations and agreements, have committed to 43% emissions reduction by 2030 on the levels of 2005. That's a big statement, and it is a legislated target. 82% generations are aimed to be coming from renewables by 2030. That's quite massive. And the biggest of them all is the net zero by 2050. And the Labour government, which came into power in 22, have also committed lots of funds, significant funding for the energy transition process. Out of the 25 billion clean energy spending budgeted, I mean, 20 billion is identified for modernizing and improving the grid, which is, as we move from centralized to decentralized energy generation resources. I mean, it's important and imperative that we modernize the grid and support the distributed energy system. Not to fall behind, in fact, the states are very active. As you see it on your screen, starting from New South Wales, their commitment is net zero by 2050, falling in line with Australia, the Australian target, reduce the emissions by almost 50% by 2030, and a whole lot of other commitments. The biggest of them was started as renewable energy zones in New South Wales. Victoria, which is also aiming for 50% renewable energy generation by 2030, and has an ambition to legislate 95% of renewable energy generation by 2035. The biggest advantage, again, is all these targets are legislated. So you cannot kind of, the whole of the state economic activity moves towards these legislated targets. Queensland, the sunniest of the states, is not falling behind at all and is targeting 80% of generation through renewables by 2035. South Australia, which is probably the deepest penetration in terms of renewables as of now, is aiming for 100% renewables by 2030, and also now have introduced various budgetary provisions for building hydrogen industry. In continuation, the Western Australia, which is covering almost the 1/3 of Australia's landmass, is also committing 80% by 2030, and also is gunning more for hydrogen generation capacity. The ACT, which is around the capital city Canberra, has already is already 100% on renewables since many years, and is aiming to move away from 100% gas usage by 2045. And obviously, they are much ahead as to achieve net zero by 2045. Tasmania today is almost 100% on renewables, largely driven by the hydro electricity generations, and they're aiming at surplus energy generation. They have also very good wind resources, and through if the second subsea link is installed, then we can harness more energy generation in Tasmania and feed into the grid in the mainland. Snapshot of the the renewable energy generation in 2022 by various fuels. Almost 36% energy was generated through renewables, and out of that, wind is the number one, in terms of generation. Solar, large-scale solar is kind of ramping up slowly, surely. But what's most interesting is the small scale, which is essentially comprised of rooftop solar. The slide provides you, the state-wise distribution, how each state in Australia is contributing to the renewable energy, a generation of 36%. Tasmania, as you can see, is close to 100% in terms of generation. And on the mainland, South Australia, with the deep penetration of wind, is about 72% generation. And most of the other states are also catching up. The as I said, rooftop has significantly contributed. And then as we stand today, more than 12 gigawatts of rooftop installations on almost 30% of homes in Australia, which is quite sizable, and making almost each one of us who have installed rooftop as a generator in the system and controlling the way forward. 9.8% electricity generation came from rooftops in 2022, which constitutes almost 25% of the renewable generation in Australia. And just I was reading the Renew Economy newspaper today, or the publication, and this is very heartening that of the almost 22 gigawatts in generation, close to 50% was coming from rooftops, which is a new record in Australia, and which sent basically the coal to its almost the lowest point in terms of generation. And as a result, also the demand in the grid, the national energy market, also was reduced to its record low, because people were generating and consuming the electricity themselves. And I mean, this could continue as we have more independent houses coming up and more policies and schemes launched by every state. So we can continue to see at the rate of almost 3 gigawatts of rooftop solar in the country. I mean, in terms of the large scale generating assets in renewables, uh, we have almost 6.5 gigawatts. Sorry for the typo. 6.5 gigawatts, installed through large scale solar, largely driven from 2018, when the global price levels for solar PV dropped significantly, as around the world, and also the significant production ramp up in China could kind of drive the global prices down. So almost 6.5 gigawatts have been installed, and this will continue to kind of go only north. I mean, the trend is also that we have now large scale solar projects being developed, implemented, and connected to the grid, and that would continue with the green hydrogen story, which I will refer to in my subsequent presentation. At the bottom of the slide, you can see that 35%, almost 35% of renewable generation in Australia is coming from wind. Wind, was one of the early mover, and as you could see, after 2015, when a bipartisan agreement was struck between the Liberals and the Labor to generate 33,000 gigawatt hours through renewable energy by 2020. That was the renewable energy target, and ever since, wind just took off. And every year we see, additional capacities being built and connected to the grid. As of now, more than 9 gigawatts has been connected to the grid, and there are at least 25-30 projects which are either close to financial close or which have been financially closed and they're under construction. Victoria is the largest and the leading state in terms of wind assets, and the topography, the infrastructure, the logistics is allowing Australia to continue to increase the turbine nameplate. As we speak, 7.2 megawatt is the turbine that is being kind of approved and is being sort of installed in Australia onshore. And there are also zones identified of New South Wales, Victoria, and South Australia, where offshore wind farms are being in the early pre-development stage. So we could see, and going back and connecting with the wind resources in Australia, we can see that with both wind and solar combined, we can drive the levelized cost of energy significantly down. The increase and the ramp up of capacity is also helped by lots of corporates jumping in. As in last year, almost 1.6 gigawatts volume was negotiated and agreed by various large corporates to secure their generation from renewable resources. Many of them are like, some of them are like Microsoft, Apple, local business giants, Telstra, Woolworths, etc. And then remaining behind is the mining giant like BHP, which is also secured significant volume. The biggest advantage, as we move to the renewable energy as a main source generation, is the battery storage system. As of end of 2022, we had almost 1.1 gigawatt of energy storage capacity connected to the grid, and there are at least 4 to 5 gigawatts worth projects under development or construction. The current trend is 2 to 4 hours of energy storage, but soon we can see, we can see 6 to 8 hours of energy storage. What is also being complemented is smaller scale batteries. As you can see, especially South Australia is leading in this aspect, where there are, people are incentivized with significant rooftop generation There are also small scale batteries. Individual houses and owners are being allowed to be purchasing or with subsidies, so that there is significant energy which is stored and released into the grid when the grid needs it the most. Now we've seen, very strong wind solar resources, significant capacities being built, and a few years back, just prior to COVID, as the entire world was talking about, hydrogen as a future fuel, the Australian government formulated its first national green hydrogen strategy, which allows a structured and formulated approach to create opportunities, and looking at the increased interest and conviction that hydrogen could be the future fuel. Now Australia is only accelerating with large scale green energy hydrogen projects. This strategy was released in 2019. That was pre-COVID. But during the COVID, lots of assumptions had to be sort of went off the roof, and then now the strategy is being reformulated. What it will do is basically explore to the fullest extent the clean hydrogen potential of Australia, go in a structured, organized manner to set up the projects with probably co-located wind and solar uh, capacities, and then also it should allow Australia to sort of scale up quickly. But as we will see in subsequent presentation, there are certain bottlenecks that we will have to work through to really harness this. Australia, you can see on the screen, uh, the scale of high suitability for green energy, green hydrogen is lying around the large coastal belt of Australia, running northeast, from Queensland, running through New South Wales, Victoria, and then continue until South Australia, and then we take off again in the Western Australia and running close to the Northern Territory here. And the biggest advantage is that, these are also good locations for wind and solar, allowing significant efficiency gains, and not to say, the least about the coastal belt that these locations are close to, wherein you can create significant export opportunities. So what we say in Australia is we are going to export the sunshine and wind from Australia, obviously converted into hydrogen and its derivative ammonia. What we also say is that it's a SWCL advantage. It's a solar wind converted into cost and then translated into logistic advantage. And as we progress further, we could hear more about large scale projects and how they're coming online. In order to sort of support the energy transition process, and also considering the hydrogen superpower aspiration, the Australian Energy Market Operator, through its National Energy Market Grid, has plotted various scenarios, and the most likely scenario is a step change, which will consider rapid consumer-led transformation of energy sector and coordinated economy-wide action. Which will, as you can see that by 2050, we could have, almost 200 odd gigawatts of, wind and solar generating capacities in the grid. Currently, we have about 15 to 20, including the rooftop, about 25 of that. So it's almost a 10-fold increase if we adopt the step change. So in the next 25 years, we have an opportunity of almost installing 225 odd gigawatts of wind and solar capacities. That's enormous opportunity in just one country. But now, if you look at the green hydrogen superpower scenario, that the graph just takes off. And if we see that by 2050 we could have almost 750 gigawatts of generating capacity, meaning almost quadrupling the wind and solar capacities in the grid. These are mind-boggling numbers coming, just from one country with low consumption, but tremendous hydrogen generation capacity. And if you just take a step back and analyze, what are the major green hydrogen zones identified by International Energy Agency around the world? So Australia is one of the top 5, just along with China, USA, uh, uh, Gulf, and India. So where hydrogen can be produced at the lowest possible cost. Just another picture of translated wind and energy potential, and more important to note at the bottom is that by say around 2043, you would have coal completely taken off grid. Australia is adopting a renewable energy zone strategy. So the which are identified based on the best of the resources, wind and solar, as well as the current grid infrastructure, and what cost optimally you can upgrade the grid and still and holistically generate and produce electricity at the most economical fashion. So the energy security and reliability, the 3 aspects on which the entire strategy is being framed by the market operator, that can be realized. On the left hand side, is the REZ scenario as of 2030, and then you can see that it is thickly being populated with many zones appearing and emerging to meet the 2050 targets. In snapshot, what you can see on this slide is a summary of what impact the step change. Leave aside the green hydrogen scenario, but even if we go with a step change, just meeting the electricity needs as well as converting most of the energy needs into electricity, you can see storage capacity jumping say from almost 30-fold, to about 60 gigawatts by 2050. There is all kinds of technology will be required, and as we speak, we are also developing innovative technology of gravitational energy storage, which can harness the abandoned mine shafts and open cast mines. In a couple of years, we could have that technology also commercialized. Uh, the biggest impact, as our industry could see, is in a 9-fold increase in the wind and solar, large-scale wind and solar capacity. The distributed solar, moves from almost 15 to 70 odd gigawatts. They're leveraging the small scale as well as rooftops. It is anticipated by 2050, 70% of the homes will have rooftop, installed. The energy usage, this is replacing gas and other generating resources, including oil fired or the diesel fired vehicles. We could see a number of 320 terawatt hours of energy used from electricity, and that's a massive requirement on the grid. And by 2040 odd, we would have 100% coal withdrawn from the grid, and we could have a residual capacity of almost 10 gigawatts for the gas fired peaking plants, providing various balancing services and capacities. That also provides a challenge and an opportunity. So the Australia is seriously talking about and considering and working on developing the supply chain locally as the entire world moves to the green energy transition system. You would see global bottlenecks of supply chain in wind, solar, hydrogen, the electrolyzers, energy storage devices, etc. So there are lots of initiatives the government is taking to unlock and create local manufacturing capacities. Recently, we also heard that 2 giants, Brookfield, which is one of the largest asset manager, and then Reliance Energy, which is an Indian giant, they have signed an agreement to unlock $30 billion of local manufacturing of solar, battery, and wind components in Australia. This will create a lot of opportunities, but obviously there are challenges associated with that. And some of those are sort of summarized on this slide. the biggest one that we will face, and we are already facing, is the shortage of skills in energy management, manufacturing, asset management. Grid engineering is one of the rarest commodity at this point of time, and the grid engineers are in short supply and high demand, and they're asking, like, significant price for their services. We'll need capital flow. I mean, trillions of dollars to kind of support, and supply chain risk is already there. I mean, today the solar industry is largely dominated by China, and that needs to be unlocked. And then many countries are taking steps towards that. The ESG compliances for all businesses will kick in, and that will create some cows as well as opportunities. But most important is that having all this potential, how can we leverage it and export this on sea to the other countries, especially Southeast Asia, as well as other parts of Europe. Uh, the government is also taking and in institutionalizing various initiatives to unlock the grid. As I said, $20 billion have been announced already in the budget, and there are various projects, which are already in the pipeline, which were formulated by the Energy Security Board, formulated by most of the energy ministers. And on the top of this are, like, some of the interconnectors which are being upgraded and due to be commissioned in next 1 to 2 years. For sure, I mean, this is a map of various coal power plants in Australia, and what are their the closure are also mentioned. And as we speak, Lidl, which is one of the oldest, has come off the grid, and now that particular precinct is being converted into a large renewable energy hub, leveraging the infrastructure already exists of, I mean, the transmission and the power evacuation. But it's quite likely that many of these projects will come offline, like much ahead of their scheduled or the designed and operational life, as the cost of generation from these coal power plants is kind of not competitive with renewable energy as of now. So at QPQ, as I mean, latching on to what Oksana said, I mean, we are a global organization, and on this slide you can see the map of the country, the worldwide map of countries where we are supporting. And as we speak, like we have more than 100 projects being advised by QPQ, and I mean, in the countries highlighted where we are advising. With the on one side, we have 500 plus tier one investors. I mean, some of the big names you can see, which is a good mix of the global as well as local investors in Australia. Continuation with that list. I mean, just to name a few. But I mean, in Australia, I mean, we've seen so far tremendous natural resources advantage, the aspiration of Australia to become a green energy superpower. Various governments, like both federal and state, gearing up with legislated targets to leverage the advantage and lead basically the green hydrogen industry around the world, including local manufacturing. It creates so many opportunities for us, like across the value chain, be it development of projects, as well as construction of the projects and operationalizing these projects across the sustainability space, be it wind, solar, green hydrogen, solar and battery manufacturing, and not to leave behind, I mean, the waste to energy and waste to value. With at QPQ, we are very well positioned with more than 35 investors with whom we have relationship. It's a blend of local Australia-based IPPs as well as global investors. And then we are advising almost all the technologies, as I mentioned. We have local-based. I'm based in Australia, and I have good support from the core team as well as other deal advisors in QPQ network. And currently, we are covering most of the states, ranging from north in Queensland down to Western Australia. And the projects that we are advising are in the capex terms are ranging between 50 million to 10 billion Australian dollars. Yes, it's a 10 billion number. I mean, it's a massive green hydrogen project in Western Australia. And I mean, the kind of projects we are also supporting are early stage to operational, disposing of operational assets. Finally, we are here to help you in one or the other way, either to help secure funding for development, construction, or if you want, to deploy your capital, we can projects for you, well prepared, well curated projects, and in short, we are here to help you. Thank you for patient listening, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mukesh. What a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And thank you for also covering what we normally do in the end, in regards to the criteria and what we focus on. I think it's very helpful. A lot of questions, some of them we'll address separately. Let's take another 10 or so minutes to cover a few important questions, and also quite a few people asked about what you have covered in the past few slides, what kind of projects we are funding, and whether we look at LNG or early stage projects and ventures. This is all basically we have quite a kind of properly defined criteria, and I have shared in the chat a slide. Apart from Mukesh's presentation, I have also shared another presentation that outlines what we primarily focus on. And also there is a link where you can go and submit projects for review. And you can also send it directly to my email, vlad@qpq.international. And now in regards to questions, and there are some questions and comments mixed. I will read them out to you, and then you can handle them, okay?
Sure, no problems.
So the first one, actually, we got two same questions related to PPP. So public-private partnership. Does the government support PPP for green energy infrastructure in Australia?
In a way, yes. The government is the biggest advantage is the copper spring in Queensland. I mean, it's a government-owned project, government-funded project, but it's also attracting investment. It's not 100% equity of 100% funded by the Queensland government. There are other projects there are two government organizations. One is ARENA, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, which supports various projects, for various technologies to be developed. But importantly, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, the CEFC, which is also funding various projects, but they are not the 100% funders of any project. It's in participation with other local or international investors.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it's a very selective basis.
Okay, got it. So now question from Castrol. Australia developed the world's largest solar concentrator called Big Dish. Would the presenter help in facilitating technology transfer in order to localize manufacturing by project developers in solar thermal?
We can consider it on merit. Depending upon whether it falls into venture capitalism or the project finance. At QPQ, the 500 odd investors that we have, they are mostly with the mandate of project financing. So we'll have to review the project, and we can do a quick assessment and give a feedback as to we can or we cannot support.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then next one from Balkrishna. The work being carried out in Australia as per your presentation is really impressive. Such alternative sources of energy is a must for our country like India. And do your company work hand in hand with India in line with such renewable sources of energy?
Answer is yes, in more than one channel. If you allow me, I'll take a couple of minutes. At this point of time, there is a government to government G2G dialogue, and various projects in terms of green energy, green hydrogen, as well as renewable energy are constituted and being reviewed by the energy ministers of both India and Australia. That's one. There is a local chamber of commerce, Australia-India Chamber of Commerce, which is also running a national industry group. Incidentally, I'm connected with that. I run that national industry group, which is facilitating collaboration between the companies in India and Australia. there are other channels like Invest New South Wales, Victoria Chamber of Commerce, other trade commissions like I mean from Western Australia or Queensland, which are also doing road shows to bring people together and allowing them to sort of collaborate. So there are more than one channels through which I mean the technology transfer or leveraging capabilities between India and Australia are being encashed. And one of my slide also included the massive, one of the biggest of them all, like the Brookfield is not Indian investor, but it has signed an agreement with Reliance, which is $80 billion cash rich company group in India, and they've signed up like $30 billion agreement to unlock manufacturing potential in Australia.
Okay, very good. In regards to the grid, so what are the steps being taken to upgrade the grid?
There are, I mean, at least on twofold. One is, we say, enhancing the capacity. In the past, one of the slide included 15 odd coal power plants, as well as, what I have not covered is the hydroelectricity generating projects. But they were all like, centralized, generation capacities, generating 24/7 and pumping into the grid. So the grid, which was designed and implemented for more than 60, 70 years, is becoming a big bottleneck. Yes, and so as a result of that, one, it is being upgraded. Second, I mean, there are in one of my slide I had included various projects which are unlocking the potential of the renewable energy intensive zones, the renewable energy zones, to sort of connect with a small a transmission line to these zones from the main grid. And finally, I mean, as we try to sort of reach, I mean, the 320 terawatt hours of energy generation, energy consumption from the grid, the entire grid will also need upgrade, and that's part of the whole integrated systems plan, which is formulated in the national energy market in particular, because it's connecting almost 85% of the Australian population, and that's part of the integrated systems plan. So it's all coordinated, concerted effort and best utilization of the capacities and optimizing the cost. Finally, it is the energy security and reliability at cheapest cost. That's the three-dimensional goal the market is looking at.
Yeah, that was one. That was my question about the grid. We know that that's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
In regards to I think perhaps you have covered this in terms of the areas in Australia, most suitable locations for wind and solar parks. If you could highlight those again, would be very useful, I think.
I mean, Australia as a country, I mean, our habitation is 90% around the coast, or like, maybe 100 kilometers from the coast into mainland. And incidentally, I mean, first couple of slides covered like, the wind map of Australia and the solar map of Australia. And these sites are also pretty close to, I mean, from the coast, running into 100 to 200 kilometers. And out of them, like it's up to like, I mean, the most suitable land you can like, secure. And then most of the land owners are like, owning 100 to 200, 500 hectares. So the land acquisition process also becomes simpler. Though the negotiation process with individual landowner is complicated. But if you, in summary, I mean, it's around the coastal regions, like, where we have the best of wind, solar, and now that benefit is an advantage being converted into the green hydrogen zones as well, what I covered in one of the slides, which provides the biggest advantage. As we already have LNG, we have significant LNG export. So there are already LNG terminals. So we already have experience of the logistics managing export of LNG. And many of these terminals can be used for, I mean, exporting green hydrogen or ammonia, as well as, that experience can be leveraged to build additional ports.
Very good. There are a few more. So next one is Australia also looking to manufacture renewable energy components locally?
Yes,
Yeah.
significant activity in the last 1.5 to 2 years. I mean, the government has also institutionalized a study. I mean, spending almost a few $1 million to compile a report and then present and identify the opportunities. I mean, taking a step back, if you look at almost 80% of solar cell manufacturing innovations were kind of developed in Australia.
Really?
It's a yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I mean, as Australia, like was working on a completely offshoring strategy for entire manufacturing, it gave out all that know-how, and then the other countries are benefiting. So now Australia is, I mean, just the fact that probably we were, I mean, non-competitive. But looking at, I mean, if we really want to harness the green energy superpower, which is a reality and can happen, otherwise, then the entire world is also going to suffer. I mean, with such brilliant resources, very low local consumption in terms of population, we are hardly 26 per million people in Australia. The population growth is hardly forecasted less than 2% over the next 25, 30 years. And then, so where you can generate and then kind of an export. And in order to harness this, as every country is busy to kind of their own with their own commitments to the COP 21s or 26 or 28s or all of that, and then contributing their bit for the energy transition and greenhouse gas emission processes. Australia has been kind of at this point of time forced to look at manufacturing, and one of the leading position, as I mentioned, and Brookfield and Reliance, they have announced a 30 billion plan. I mean, to unlock the whole manufacturing capacity in Australia. So you could see, like, integrated solar cell manufacturing, battery manufacturing, wind components manufacturing, especially blades, with the bulky, heavy items, or assembling or various, I mean, the wind turbine nacelles in Australia. Australia already manufactures the wind towers. So it's a matter of bringing all the components, assembling the nacelles, and manufacturing blades. So you can manufacture largely a wind turbine on ground in Australia. The problem has been the lumpy demand, and now with this kind of as you would have seen, I mean, even the step change scenario or the green superpower scenario, I mean, it creates a significant consistent demand onshore, so you can offset a lot of international logistics and complexity costs, and then promote the promote the local industry to sort of meet that demand, which will be consistent. And so you would have very little of idle cost in the manufacturing setup, offsetting the high labor cost in Australia.
Yeah, I was just thinking how competitively they can do it in relation to other producers. I think labor is one of the bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
Mukesh, you also involved a lot into India-Australia collaboration. So one of the questions, from Vijay is about, he's interested in more details about this collaboration. Perhaps you could share a little bit, a few highlights.
Yeah. So
especially
year,
in the sector in the sector where we focus on.
Yeah. So the India-Australia collaboration is driven by two aspects at this point of time. One is the economic and collaboration trade agreement, which was signed, which is a quasi free trade agreement signed between India and Australia last year, and it was legislated by the Parliament in Australia towards end of 22, beginning of 23. That is the biggest driver, which is waiving of duties structure, or the simplifying duty structure, waiving of duties on some 90 components on one side and the other side as well. And that is now kind of translated into government to government dialogue. As I mentioned, there is a working group formed for green hydrogen, wherein there are investments which are kind of targeted on either side, leveraging also the low cost manufacturing in India. There are Australian billionaire Dr. Andrew Forrest is very active, working various Indian business houses in setting up large scale green hydrogen capacities in India. And apart from that, the Quad, I mean, which is a geopolitical shift, the Quad alliance between Australia, India, extended to Japan North, and then on the west side, I mean, extended to United States, and their dialogue is also contributing significantly to various businesses, administration, and at the political level, to collaborate and agree upon various programs. And as I mentioned, there are other chambers of commerce, or every state has initiatives to enable companies collaborate and leverage this capability.
Mhm. Okay, very good. Well, I think that's probably we'll stop with
Was done
questions
well,
at this
yes.
point. Oksana, you wanted to add something else? I think I
No.
interrupted you in the beginning when yeah.
Not
No?
really. I mean,
You
it's very
raised your
difficult to
hand, and
add. No, I had
Amira was
I had a
messaging me.
question.
Oksana wanted to add something, and I couldn't see because I have multiple
Hmm.
windows in front of me, questions coming in and
I
chat.
can see that you're like a cat that is just kind of chasing the laser point across the screen, you know. So I'm glad that you're doing it, not me. No, I had a question about the grid. You know, we constantly have this, discussion, so it has already been asked and answered. And one question also on your slide, you were talking about 35 investors. I was just a little bit confused about that, you know. So we have over 500 investors, right? You know, I think I got confused there somewhere, but I think then you reiterated. So we work closely with over 500 investors, and significant part of it of this 500 are interested in Australian market. We consider Australian market one of the premium markets. So we are very welcoming collaboration with local developers. We looking forward to receiving your project presentations. Would love to add value. And see more green energy projects kind of ushered into construction, right? You know, so there is a lot of scope and a lot of work there to be done. So with that, Mukesh, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. Really have nothing to add. I'm amazed by how well we, kept in audience attention. Everyone who actually arrived is still here, so 95% of the people, so which is quite unusual. So obviously very interesting content. I thank everyone for attending today our webinar, and look forward to be connecting with you for our next webinar. We normally have them once a month, once every 1.5 months. We will be announcing it shortly. And wishing you a successful rest of the year, completing this year successfully.
Yeah, just before everyone leaves, so I assume several people joined a bit later. So I have re-uploaded both presentations and I have shared the link. There was some issue with the link, so in case if you're not able to submit the project through the link, it's better if you just email your project for review directly to my email, vlad@qpq.international. I put it in the chat again, and yes, we look forward to receiving your projects and seeing you again at our following webinars. Thank you very much, Mukesh. Very interesting presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.